Who's the best poet to ever write, to ever live? Pretty subjective question, right? Hard to answer. Not really. Not for me. Stick around. Welcome back to the Prose channel. So, the best poet in the world, who ever lived, who is that? Right? I mean, I have a very strong opinion about who it is for me. And that doesn't mean that I'm right, but as a person who's grown up on poetry, who was raised by dead poets, dead men, writers, period, novelists, poets. I remember reading, I read a book of poetry when I was really young, a teenager, by an unknown man to me, named Charles Bukowski. And I'd never heard of him. And I read, "The days run away like wild horses over the hills." Just, just blew me away. That I was so beside myself in awe at that man's writing. So I ended up devouring everything he wrote. As a lot of young men did, a lot of young, like budding writers read Bukowski, and they read Brautigan. They read the poetry of, name it. Back then, one thing I never got into though, and I don't know why, I never liked the beats. Just never cared for them. I tried to read them. There's just this fucking pretentiousness to me when I read them. And that doesn't take away from how beautifully Jack Kerouac wrote. He had some lines in On the Road, which for me, who was living on the road at the time when I finally read that book, I knew it was a lie. To me, it was a lie. Maybe the road for him was different back then, but that was not my road, put to you that way. But he had some lines, and I remember I read some stuff he wrote, like, the Dharma Bums. Forget about it. Beautiful novel. He had some good shit. He did. I think that it'd be kind of like if you liked a certain band, right? Like, I think On the Road was like his Black album, and no one even bothers to even understand that the same band recorded Kill 'Em All as their first album, right? And so I think that the whole world kind of jumped on a phrase he wrote in passing, but at the same time, a very powerful writer, prolific, compulsive. And I think that if he hadn't have died bloated and young, that he would have been even more of a force to be reckoned with, right? So I can say that a lot of the tragedy of writers of that time, that was also fuel for a lot of us who had survived that and decided not to become the stereotypical alcoholic writer. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because alcohol is fun. But when I was reading Bukowski, I remember he referred to a lot of writers that he turned me on to. And he had a line from in one of his poems about Robinson Jeffers, and he said he couldn't find perfection in human form, so he found it in non-human form, or something like that. So it intrigued me. So I went out and I found a book called Cawdor and Medea by Jeffers. It wasn't a poetry book, but it was good writing nonetheless. And so I ended up coming into this whole phase, this whole era, if you will, of life where I just couldn't stop reading poetry. And of course, I would, plow through a novel. But this book here is probably hands down my favorite poetry book. It's by this guy right here, Robinson Jeffers, The Beginning and the End. And I actually read the title poem of this for a podcast, and it was an honor. It was a full circle for me too. You know what I mean? It was a really fucking cool feeling. And I just wanted to read a short poem of his from this book. If I can find it, here it is. It's called Night Piece. And anybody who knows his history, he built a house in Big Sur, a cliff looking out over the water, and brick by stone, literally. He built this house. It's a tourist attraction, but I mean, this guy was such a badass. And I'm going to put this piece up I recorded. It was a Jeffers poem, and it's a pretty respectably sized file. And but anyway, I want to read Night Piece here. If you keep command of yourself, you can hear almost anything, but man must rest. A man must sleep. That is, abandon control. Then all the sick demons take him in charge. Who ever heard of a pleasant dream? Fear and remorse are monstrously exaggerated, and fear of responsibility, that is what drags us out of our beds into the bitter black night, to walk the floor and shudder and regain control. Else, we should lie and scream. I seem to hear in the nights many estimable people screaming like babies. I bite my lips and feel my way to the window, where the moon rakes through cloud, the wind pants like a dog, and the ocean tears at his shore. Gray claws of a great cat. Slitting the granite, the elements, thank God, are well enough. It is only man must always be wakeful, steering through hell. Well, I could have read that better, but that to me, there are so many good things about this writer, and his grasp on mortality and the beauty of his acceptance of that mortality and the exploration of like the underbelly of what makes us beautiful and disgusting, and what brings us to terms with our fear and our desires and our what makes us like flesh and blood, right? This guy just fucking nailed it. And I remember being so inspired by him. I would read him and I would get choked up. You know, when I was a kid, and I was like, fuck, this is beautiful. So I mean, this to me is he is my favorite poet. And and he sits on top of a very steep and respected mountain of poets that I just love to read. And looking back, I'm really lucky that I stumbled upon him through the work of Bukowski, right? Who had he had a great eye for writers. I remember through him I found Nelson Algren, The Neon Wilderness, and hands down again, my opinion, I mean, in my opinion, the best short story book ever written. Ever. I mean, The Captain Had Bad Dreams, the first story in that book, yeah. I mean, he raised the bar so high for the short story form. You know, if I ever get a million miles away from what that man created, I might be onto something awfully good. And I have yet to write something that even approaches his mastermind, you know. So I think that it's really important to have these influences in your writing, but it's also important to know when to cut them loose and build your own cathedrals. And so that, to me, I wanted to come on the channel today and talk about this. And I want to know in the comments, I'd like to read, who is your favorite poet? Who is your best poet in the world? I'd like to know personally. And if it's somebody I've never read, I want to get that book that you recommend for me. So that's going to do it. Thank you for being here. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel here. And if you haven't already gone to thepros.com, go to thepros.com, get a profile, read, write, inspire, be inspired. We'd love to see you there. I want to know, what are your roots? What, who was it? Who was that you would say is your favorite poet, if not the best poet in your mind? All right, that's it. I'm out of here. Stay tuned for the Jeffers read if you want to hear it, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Take good care. The Beginning and the End by Robinson Jeffers. The unformed volcanic earth, a female thing, furiously following with the other planets, their lord the sun, her body is molten metal pressed rigid. By its own mass, her beautiful skin, basalt and granite, and the lighter elements, swam to the top. She was like a mare in heat, eyeing the stallion. Screaming for life in the womb, her atmosphere was the breath of her passion, not the blithe air men breathe and live, but marsh gas, ammonia, sulfured hydrogen. Such poison as our remembering bodies return when they die and decay, and the end of life meets its beginning. The sun heard her and stirred, her thick air with fierce slidings and flagellations of germinal power, building impossible molecules, amino acids, and flashy unstable proteins. Thence, life was born. It's nitrogen from ammonia, carbon from methane, water from the cloud and salts from the young seas. It dripped down into the primal ocean like a babe's urine, soaking the cloth, heavily built upon protein molecules, chemically growing, bursting apart as the tensions in the inordinate molecule become unbearable. That is to say, growing and reproducing themselves, a virus on the warm ocean. Time and the world changed. The proteins are no longer created, the ammoniac atmosphere, and the great storms no more. This virus now must labor to maintain itself. It clung together into bundles of life, which we call cells, with microscopic walls enclosing themselves against the world. But why would life maintain itself, being nothing but a dirty scum on the sea dropped from foul air? Could it perhaps perceive glories to come? Could it foresee that cellular life would make the mountain forest and the eagle dawning monstrously beautiful, wings, eyes, and claws dawning over the rock ridge, and the passionate human intelligence straining its limits, striving to understand itself in the universe to the last galaxy? Flamentia Moenia Mundi, Lucretius wrote, alliterating like a Saxon. All those M's mean majesty, the flaming world walls, far-flung fortifications of being against not being. For after a time the cells of life bound themselves into clans, a multitude of cells to make one being, as the molecules before had made of many one cell. Meanwhile, they had invented chlorophyll and ate sunlight, cradled in peace on the warm waves, but certain assassins among them discovered that it was easier to eat flesh than feed on lean air and sunlight. Thence the animals, greedy mouths and guts, life robbing life, grew from the plants, and as the ocean ebbed and flowed, many plants and animals were stranded in the gray marshes along the shore, where many died and some lived. From these grew all land life, plants, beasts, and men, the mountain forest and the mine of Aeschylus, and the mouse in the wall. What is this thing called life? But I believe that the earth and stars too, and the whole glittering universe and rocks on the mountain have life. Only we do not call it so. I speak of the life that oxidizes fats and proteins and carbohydrates to live on, and from that chemical energy makes pleasure and pain, wonder, love, adoration, hatred, and terror. How do these things grow from a chemical reaction? I think they were here already. I think the rocks and the earth and the other planets and the stars and galaxies have their various consciousness. All things are conscious, but the nerves of an animal, the nerves and brain bring it to focus. The nerves and brain are like a burning glass to concentrate the heat and make it catch fire. It seems to us martyrs than the blazing hearth from which it came. So we scream and laugh, clamorous animals, born howling to die, groaning. The old stones in the dooryard prefer silence, but those and all things have their own awareness, as the cells of man have. They feel and feed and influence each other, each unto all, like the cells of a man's body, making one being. They make one being, one consciousness, one life, one God. But whence came the race of man? I will make a guess. A change of climate killed the great northern forests, forcing the man-like apes down from their trees. They starved up there. They had been secure up there, but famine is no security. Among the withered branches, blew famine. They had to go down to the earth, where green still grew and small meats might be gleaned. But there the great flesh-eaters, tiger and panther and the horrible fumbling bear and endless wolf packs made life a dream of death. Therefore man has these dreams and kills out of pure terror. Therefore man walks erect, forever alerted as the bear rises to fight. So man does always. Therefore he invented fire and flint weapons in his desperate need. Therefore he is cruel and bloody-handed and quick-witted, having survived against all odds. Never blame the man. His hard-pressed ancestors formed him. The other anthropoid apes were safe in the great southern rainforest and hardly changed in a million years. But the race of man was made by shock and agony. Therefore they invented the song called language, to celebrate their survival and record their deeds, and therefore the deeds they celebrate, Achilles raging in the flame of the south, Baltic Beowulf like a fog-blinded sea bear, prowling the blasted fenland in the bleak twilight to the black water, are cruel and bloody. Epic, drama, and history, Jesus and Judas, Genghis, Julius Caesar, no great poem without the blood splash. They are a little lower than the angels, as someone said, blood-snuffing rats. But never blame them. A wound was made in the brain when life became too hard, and has never healed. It is there that they learn trembling religion and blood sacrifice. It is there that they learn to butcher beasts and to slaughter men, and hate the world. The great religions of love and kindness may conceal that, not change it. They are not primary, but reactions against the hate, as the eye after feeding on a red sunfall will see green suns. The human race is one of God's sense organs, immoderately alerted to feel good and evil, and pain and pleasure. It is a nerve-ending, like-eye taste buds, hardly able to endure the nauseous drought. It is a sensory organ of God's. As Titan-mooted Lear or Prometheus reveal to their audience, extremes of pain and passion they will never find in their own lives, but through the poems as sense organs, they feel and know them. So the exaltations and agonies of beasts and men are sense organs of God. And on other globes throughout the universe, much greater nerve endings enrich the consciousness of the one being who is all that exists. This is man's mission, to find and feel. All animal experience is a part of God's life. He would be balanced and neutral as a rock on the shore, but the red sunset waves of life's passions fling over him. He endures them, we endure ours. That ancient wound in the brain has never healed. It hangs wide. It lets in the stars, into the animal-stinking, ghost-ridden darkness, the human soul, the mind of man. Slowly, perhaps, man may grow into it. Do you think so? This villainous king of beasts, this deformed ape. He has mind and imagination. He might go far and end in honor. The hawks are more heroic, but man has a steeper mind. Huge pits of darkness, high peaks of light. You may calculate a comet's orbit or the dive of a hawk, not a man's mind. Unlock the potential of your writing with Prose Gold. Monetize your work and gain exposure to top agents and publishers. Join now and start sharing your stories with the world. Sign up for Pros Gold today. thepros.com.